Welcome to EPG Pathshala lecture series for architecture students. We will be covering fire safety in high-rise buildings. We had already covered fundamentals of fire safety. We will see how these are applied to high-rise buildings. Now, the overview of fire safety in high-rise buildings. First thing we will see is that the objective is to understand some of the specific points that need to be addressed in high-rise buildings as per the National Building Code. So, all the points which we look in this section will be based on what is specified in the National Building Code. So, that is a very important the document which is the reference point for us to look at all the safety features for high-rise buildings. Now, high-rise building as per NBC, what it means is that any building 15 meters or above in height shall be considered as high-rise building. So, this is the starting point. So, any building which is more than 15 meters is a high-rise building as per NBC. But then there could also be existing buildings in any fire zone. The code says that existing buildings need not comply with the requirements. Of course, unless there is a specific clause which says unless these are altered or in the opinion of the authority, which means the fire authority, such buildings constitute a hazard to the safety of the adjacent property or the occupants of the building itself, or it is an unsafe building. So, if there is an existing building which is more than 15 meters which has been already constructed many years back, if the fire authorities consider that it is hazard or a danger to the occupants adjacent to that building, then they may ask the building to be either pulled down or implement some of the aspects related to the fire safety. Now, permission for alteration required. Any addition or alterations of construction which is exceeding 500 meters square, which is 5000 square feet, for all high-rise buildings shall be with the approval of the local fire authority. So, it is not that once you have constructed a building and then it is as per the standards. Any alteration which is happening which is based on this size, anything area exceeding 500 meter square, which is 5000 square feet, then it needs to have the approval of the local fire authority. This is as per the basic definition in NBC. Now, we talked about briefly on classification and floor area ratios, different types of building, the occupancy classification. We talked about residential, educational, institutional, assembly, business, mercantile, industrial, storage and hazardous. You have a floor area ratio, and we also talked about type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. So, here you have, if you see, UL means unlimited. So, a residential building in a type 1 can actually, there is no restriction on the floor area ratio, whereas if you see the other buildings will have a floor area ratio restriction based on under which type they are coming under. So, this is an important area to start with when you are looking at implementing high-rise building. Now, there is also a mix and match we talked about. Today, most high-rises buildings are not occupied by only one type. There could be a mix and match. You could have a hotel and a mall, you could have a mall and a residential. In some cases, you can have office complex, mercantile building and a mall. So, there is a combination of occupancies which are there. So, this will also influence the way the FAR values are calculated. For example, if you have a residential area and it is constructed with a 4R type 1 structure, there is no limit to the total area to be considered. So, this is something which you need to understand by looking at the tables and finding out what is the occupancy, what is the fire rating and what is the area which you can build. So, this is basically a guideline to help us determine what kind of areas can be constructed in specific building classification. Now, similarly, hazardous occupancy, 4R fire load constructed 1R structure cannot be permitted. So, the various occupancies and the FAR values have to be looked into first before going ahead with the building plans. So, this is a guideline from the NBC to help us to understand how a design of a building is to be carried out. Now, just an example, if a plot area is 3000 square meters, the ground coverage permitted is 1/3 of plot area, that is from the tables. So, the ground coverage works out to 1000 square meters. FAR permitted in that locality is 4, that means the permitted total area of all the floors is 3000 into 4, that is 12,000 square meters. since the ground coverage is only 1000, the number of floors shall be 12,000 by 100. So, this is the way a practical application of FAR is done for given plot area where it is in that fire zone or locality where it is being constructed, what is the area factor for consideration, and then each floor what will be the area and the number of floors that is permitted in that particular building. So, this is an example of finding out how you can design a high rise building. Now, the other aspects of NBC are very practical guidelines to ensure that safety. When you talk about the clearances, approach, entrance, setback space, all this is ensured to ensure that in case of an emergency, a high rise building is going to have a larger impact in the way a firefighting has to happen. Firefighting in a smaller building or not a high building is not so difficult when you have the buildings which are exceeding 15 meters and then go up to several height. So, this is important from the point of view of a fire engine able to come inside. So, one of the important aspects is the width of a road. So, as per section 4.6a of the NBC, the road which abuts a high rise building shall be more than 12 meters width. The road should be hard surface to carry a minimum weight of 18,000 kgs, that is the maximum weight of a fire engine which is fully loaded with water. So, these are practical this thing. So, you can have 12 meters. So, a fire engine can approach from this side, although this side the road may taper. You can also have at an intersection, this is 12 meters, but at any 2 points if the distance available is less than 12 meters, then this cannot be considered because a fire engine cannot enter this from either side. So, this is an important aspect which is called the approach, the entrance and the setback space. Then the entrance width, as per again section, every high rise building should have at least 2 means of access, one remote to each other, which means that there should be 2 points of entrance or exit to a building, and this also specifies minimum width of 4.5 meters with a clearance of 5 meters. So, this is explained in the drawing. So, you need to have 2 entrances as for any high rise building. So, which means that you should plan the layout of the building accordingly. So, this is as far as the entrance width and height clearance. We are talking about height clearance of 5 meters. Now, the setback space or open space, again this depends on the height of the building. So, for a building up to 30 meters height, 1/3 area of the building should be the setback space, and then there should also be 6 meter space which is available within that setback space. So, that is also another aspect which is to be considered while designing the high rise building. Now, this is a table which gives the height of the building and also gives an exterior open space setbacks to be left on all sides. So, this is minimum space requirement. So, this has to be clearly adhered to. So, there is a table which gives from 9.5 meters and so on up to 50 meters, and above 50 meters you will need to have a space of 16 meters on all sides. So, this is as mandated by the NBC code. Now, there is also something related to car parking. So, it also addresses the car parking area. If in a setback area open space is more than 12 meters, the provision for car parking can be done in the setback or open spaces at the periphery, leaving a 6 meter motorable road. The 6 meter is basically for any fire engine to move. So, if this distance is more than 12 meters, then the periphery can be used for car park, allowing a 6 meter space for the fire engine to move out. So, this is something, and car parking shall also have to be done at basement. So, apart from obviously the space available at the periphery may not be enough for cars to be accommodated. So, you need to have a basement car parking with provision of 2 ramps, minimum of 2 ramps, one remote to other. So, you need to have one entry and one exit, or you need to have one entry exit and one again another entry exit, but there has to be remote to each other, they cannot be near each other. So, this is another guideline given by the NBC for car parking. So, this is something which has to be followed while designing. Now, staircases, this is again a table. This table is again available in NBC. So, it is not something we need to remember, we need to know where we need to look at. So, this is the travel distance for occupancy and type of construction. So, if you have again you have the various group of occupancies, and then you have maximum travel distance for type 1 and 2 and type 3 and 4. If you see here, at any point there should be travel distance for an exit staircase should be 30 meters. So, this is for residential, it then changes to industrial, and then if it is in a type 3 or 4 which is little bit more stringent, then the distances will reduce slightly. So, which means that a person should be able to travel to a staircase, minimum distance should be this from any point within that interior of the building. So, this is as far as travel distances for staircases applies. Now, you also have something for exit doors and capacities. So, the unit of exit width used to measure the capacity shall be 500 mm. A clear width of 250 mm shall be counted as additional half unit. Clear widths less than 250 mm shall not be counted. So, for example, this is talking about that minimum 250 mm and this distance is 500 mm. So, you need to have this space available for you to ensure that you exit through the facility. So, this is as far as exit doors and capacities. And also the total occupants, there is also a specification in terms of time. The total occupants from a particular floor must evacuate within 2.5 minutes for type 1, 1.5 minutes for type 2 and 1 minute. So, the size of the exit doorway shall be viewed accordingly, keeping in view as per the previous table. So, for example, you have the exit width is here mentioned 1500 and this setback will be about 450 or 550. If it is 550, then you need to have the exit as 1400. This is used to ensure that the people are able to evacuate. All these are design considerations to help evacuation of a building, so that if there is a fire, the people shall be evacuated safely. That is the first consideration in all these parameters which are. Similarly, if there is a fire, the fire tender engine should be able to come in, and firefighting people have to be able to access the points for fighting. Then there is, we talked about exit signage. Exit signage should be clearly visible and the route to reach the exit shall be clearly marked, and there should be signs posted. So, you will normally find that if you go to a new building, you should have these posted in regular locations, so that you are able to exit the facility. So, you have exit signs, you have clearly illuminated, because normally what happens in there is a fire, the fire electric power supply is cut, and then you will not have visibility and there could be smoke. So, you will have these exit signs which are illuminated, so that people can exit towards the exit sign. So, these shall be alternate supply shall be provided to these exit sign. They shall not be from the main source, so that you will have a battery to ensure that these signs work even if the main power is off. So, that is an important consideration for exit signs. And refugee areas, what it means is that if you have buildings for more than 24 meters in height, a refuge area is an intermediate point where people can collect, come down and then move on to a safer location. A refuge area of 15 meters square or an area equivalent to 0.3 meters. So, this is something which gives you the guideline to accommodate 2 consecutive floors. So, it is not possible sometimes when you have a high rise building, everybody cannot come down through the ground floor in one shot, there will be a stampede. So, you will have some kind of a refuge area where some people can collect at an interim point and then proceed further towards. So, it ensures that a very streamlined way of exit is maintained, so that the refugees refuge area ensures that there is no overcrowding through the staircase. So, it also deals with areas heights which are more than between 24 and 39 and above 39. So, there are guidelines for the area number of refuge areas to be provided. So, this is also a factor to be considered. Sometimes this is something which is left out, because every space on the building costs money. So, sometimes it is not possible to have a refuge area in terms from the economic point of view, but from safety point of view it is very important to provide refuge areas, so that the evacuation when it happens can happen in a very easy way. Then there is something called fire towers, which are external to the building, which allows people to get out, which is completely fire rated doors and walls. So, which means that any smoke which is happening in the building does not come into the fire tower. So, this is another provision in the code to ensure that people are able to evacuate from the smoke or the fire affected area through the fire tower. So, this is something which is also important, and the doors leading to this fire door should be always should not be tied open, or they should not be damaged. They should be ensured that they are always shut, The idea is that fire or smoke coming here does not enter into this building, because most important point in fire situation is the smoke, which causes more deaths than the actual fire or the heat itself. Now, in high rise building over 8 stories or 24 meters height, at least one required means of egress shall be a fire tower. So, apart from the exit emergency exit, you also need to have a fire tower which will be applicable for more than 8 stories or 24 meters in height. It has we talked about 2-hour fire rating. So, this is the doors which will have a fire rating, and the internal material which will also be used to ensure that you have a 2-hour fire rating. So, this is the guideline for high rise buildings with respect to the refuge areas and the fire tower. Now, lifts, any building which is more than 15 shall be provided with capacity of 8 passengers and fully automated. Obviously, you also need to have a separate fire lift, so that one fire lift per 2000 square meters of floor area shall be provided and available for exclusive use of firemen. So, normally what happens is that the lifts in a fire alarm situation are brought down, they are grounded to the ground floor, so that people do not use, because the passage above the lift can cause smoke to travel. So, people are not allowed to use the lifts, but there will be a fire lift which will be operated, which can take the firefighting team to the respective floor for fighting the fire. Now, these are all the various aspects related to how people can be evacuated from a building. Then you have the second part, which is the firefighting, which actually will be used to do the firefighting or putting out the fire, which is a combination of several aspects. If you see here, you have a table 23 of NBC, which gives minimum firefighting installation. So, this is the minimum requirements for fighting fire. You will have the classification of buildings, and then you will have different equipment which is mentioned here. You have fire extinguisher, you have a hose reel, you have a dry riser, you have wet riser, you have downcomer. So, all these parameters are important for you to understand, to ensure that the building has these in place. It also gives what is the pump capacity, what is the water capacity, and this will vary depending on the height of the building. So, we will see later how this is a summary of for different heights, what are the various parameters that are used. But before that, you need to understand what these terms mean. So, we will have a quick look through what this means. So, the basic terminologies which are used in the table 23 are fire extinguisher, hose reel, dry riser, wet riser, downcomer, yard hydrant, an automatic sprinkler system, a water supply, and pumps. This is what you saw in the previous year. These terms appear in this table in horizontal, and this is what is being mentioned here. We will look into each of them little bit briefly, but quickly to understand how they play a role. Now, the fire extinguishers basically are based on type of fire. Like we said, we can't use water for putting out an electrical fire. So, you need something which needs to be used with fire. So, the classification is type of fire, and you have extinguishers which are meeting those fires. So, for what example, water can be used on type of fire, which is basically wood, paper, cloth, but you can't use them for oil or electric or combustible material. Similarly, foam, you can use it for two types, but you can't use it for the other. Dry powder today is available, which can be used for both all kinds of fires A, B, C and D, but cannot be used for kitchen. And there are some specific extinguishing agents which are available to use for cooking oil in kitchens, where there is oil, hot oil. If that catches fire, you can use this kind of an extinguishing agents. So, Indian standard, we talked about, the standard tells you gives you the details of selection, installation and the maintenance of first aid fire extinguisher code of practice. So, this basically supplements the National Building Code and gives you how many fire extinguishers have to be placed, what kind of fire extinguisher and what height it should be maintained, and so on, what is the periodicity of maintenance. All that is available in this Indian standard edition. Now, we talked about risers and downcomers. Basically, a riser is nothing but a pipe which has outlet at each floor. Normally, this is called a dry raising main. This is used in hilly areas where water can freeze. So, normally you will not allow water inside. You have a fire engine comes in, it connects here, opens the pump, and then you can connect to the each individual outlet on each floor for you to fight fire. The other thing is called a wet raising main, where there is a tank, there is a pump, and the water is always constantly available in this pipe, and at each outlet you can have you just open the valve here and the water is available for you to fight, and the pump will continue to pump water for you to fight the fire. Then the third example is downcomer. This is normally used for lower height buildings, it is not used for high rise, so we will not look at it, but basically you have a tank, overhead tank, and then because of gravity the water will flow. But obviously when you have a high rise building, the size of the tank becomes too big, so you will normally go in for a wet rising main for high rise buildings. Now there is something called a yard hydrant, which is at the periphery of the building, which allows you to fight fire from outside the building. If there is a fire which is too big and cannot be fought by getting inside, then you use the yard hydrant to spray water on all directions towards the building. So this is a photograph of a yard hydrant which is there in the perimeter, and this is mentioned at every 45 meters and 30 meters depending on the light, ordinary or high hazard. They are maintained at a distance of 1.5 to 15 meters from the external wall of the building. So this yard hydrant is used in the periphery of the building. Now you also have hose reel, where it is there on each floor, and then you have a hose reel which is cabinet, which is inside a cabinet. You will find it in a lot of residential apartments, where you can then pull this hose reel, and this is connected to the wet riser or downcomer, and therefore then you can open the fire, use this to fight the fire. So in addition to wet riser, downcomer, first aid hose reel shall be installed in all floors. So this is something which is mandatory, which is more than 15 meters in height, every floor should have, and the length of the hose should be enough for you to reach the furthest point. So the number of hose reels will depend on the floor area of that particular building. Then you have, these are all manual methods of fighting. You have automatic sprinkler system. What it basically is that it is connected to a pipe which is carrying water. There is a bulb which contains a certain chemical or a liquid or a fluid which bursts at specific temperature. So when the heat because of the fire exceeds a certain temperature, you can see the bulb exploding and the water from the pipeline then gets sprayed, and then you can see the water flowing into the specific area. So you will have a sprinkler system is basically many such sprinklers will be put on a pipeline, and they are connected to a source of water supply from where the water is continuously available till the time the capacity is water capacity is there. Water will continue to flow out and it will put out the fire. So this is basically an automatic sprinkler system. This is something which is used in all buildings to basically protect in case the fire detection system works, and then after that you are not able to if you are unable to put out the fire and the fire becomes big, then this will protect your property, and by the time you should have evacuated the people from inside the building. So this is something which a table summary which gives basically what is the requirement, whether I can use a dry riser, whether I need to use a wet riser, whether I need to use a downcomer, and then I should, what is the capacity of the tank in liters, what is the capacity of the terrace pump, what is the capacity of the pumps. So this summary helps you to understand what kind of equipment should be available. Just to summarize, all high rise buildings must have fire extinguishers, hose reel and manual fire detection systems. A dry riser is to be used in hill station where water can freeze under guidance of local fire authority. All these systems have to be approved by the local fire authority for the technical suitability of that system to that specific location. Wet risers are a must with the exception of apartments and educational buildings as per specified heights. Automatic fire detection is mandatory in addition to manual except as above. So every high rise apartment should have, high rise building should have an automatic fire detection. So then you have number of pumps, these are something to deal with, the number of electrical pumps. Local fire authorities must be consulted for any clarification. So any building needs to have the interaction with the local fire authority before the firefighting system is implemented and installed, and then they will, the fire authorities will come and inspect and issue a no objection certificate. Only then the building can be taken up for occupancy. So it is important that for any ambiguity they are consulted and any changes suggested by them implemented, otherwise the building may not get the no objection certificate for occupation. Now we talked about manual and automatic fire detection system in the previous slide. So manual is basically something which uses a manual call point which are activated by human beings when they see a fire. This will be connected to a fire alarm panel which will sound an alarm. So it does not use automatic detection. So the NBC also allows manual call points to be used in some buildings where the person can pull a particular equipment. For example, he just breaks this glass and pulls this point, which this is connected to a fire alarm panel which will sound an alarm. So, this is called a manual system. Automatic detection uses detectors, which means it uses smoke plus heat to detect fire, and that is connected to a fire alarm panel. So, these detectors, this is detector, this is a sounder which alarms, and this is a fire alarm panel which then automatically finds out that there is a fire and then gives an alarm for people to evacuate. So, automatic fire detection system is installed as per IS 2189 code of practice, which is the Indian standard, and this is which will specify how many detectors to use, what is the spacing between detectors, what kind of detectors can be used. So, that is a detailed description of what kind of equipment can be used for automatic detection. The firefighting in high-rise buildings is basically to look at what are the provisions you need to ensure to evacuate people in case of an emergency, so that you have space enough for entry of a firefighting equipment, the firefighting engine to come into play inside, where water is available for them to use, how much amount of water is available. These are some of the standards which need to be followed, so that the firefighting equipment can come in. Secondly, it also deals with how people will be taken out, what is the number of staircases which need to be available, what is a refuge area where there is a large high rise building which is more than 24 meters height, how many number of refuge areas should be allowed, what will be the capacity of exits, how many lifts should be there, what will be the number of fire lifts which are available. So, all these are allowed are ensured specified to ensure that people are taken out of the building safely if there is a fire. At the same time, the fire can be fought by using either manual fire extinguishers, water based, or using the sprinkler systems which are designed to meet the requirements. So, in high rise buildings, the important point to be considered are as per the definition, any building which is more than 15 meters. So, that is the first step, and then to try and understand the various aspects related to how people will be taken out in case of an emergency, and what are the different space availability to be made around the building and outside the building for entry of fire fighting equipment. And we also talked about what are the automatic and manual fire detection systems which have to be put in place, so that the purpose of the fire detection system is to ensure that adequate advance warning is given to people, so that they are able to evacuate. So, it is also important to install the right kind of detection systems, so that false alarms are not coming into play. So, the detection system has to be as foolproof as possible. The way it is designed and installed is very important, and here the building code, National Building Code and the standards, the Bureau of Indian Standards have very detailed information of how a fire alarm system has to be installed and what kind of cables have to be used. So, it is an elaborate solution which has to be put in place. So, the fire detection system gives advance warning, and then based on the type of building, the number of exits, people come out of the building, and then you have the fire fighting system in place, starting with the manual firefighting, then the automatic sprinkler system. The sprinkler system also has many variations depending on the type of building. Like we talked about, the bulb will burst at a specific temperature. That temperature will depend on the kind of environment where it is put in. So, you can have bulbs which will burst at 59, 65 and so on. Different temperatures are available for it to burst. So, design of that is also very critical to ensure that the building is protected adequately. So, these are the various aspects of National Building Code. So, we looked at the kind of building, type of classification of buildings, fire rating of buildings, fire rating of the various components that are used or various materials that are used in construction, and then the various signages, exit sign and all that. These are the elements which are related to fire prevention, and then we talked about fire protection. So, this is in summary, the building code gives more than information for each type of building to ensure that the safety systems are adhered to. Thank you very much.